Thank you, and great to keep the Scottish accents flowing from the previous presentation as well. I've got 15 minutes, so we're going to move at pace. But yes, we have a book. The book, in a nutshell, is simply to say that 20 years ago, the music industry woke up to Napster. We saw our business be completely upended. We spent 10 years fighting change, holding on to the old vine, the Tarzan reference, then 10 years embracing change, reaching out to the streaming economy, and now we have a recovery which is the envy of everyone else. And if you have a 20-year head start in being the first to suffer, the first to recover, there's got to be some lessons that I, one of the very few economists in this business, can teach you in the audience. The book offers 8 of them, 8 transferable lessons in avoiding the suffering and getting straight to the recovery. The book has 8 principles. Last year I talked about this principle, paying attention. What happens when we're competing for scarce attention? What happens when Netflix says sleep is our biggest competitor? Well, I should remind Netflix that Spotify has some great sleep music playlists, but it's an interesting thing about scarcity. If Netflix wins that time, everyone else loses, which means everyone else has less time to compete for. That's attention economics. And what did we learn last year? We learned that songs are adapting to attention economy. What do I mean by that? Firstly, songs are getting shorter. Songs are wrapping up now after 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And secondly, the chorus is being moved to the front. The way that we write songs is not guitar introduction, verse, bridge, chorus. We begin with the chorus. And for those who heard me speak last year, why does that happen? It happens for an economic reason. Firstly, in streaming economics, you only get paid if you've been played for more than 30 seconds. So it makes sense to put the chorus at the front so you don't skip. Avicii spotted this in 2013. Secondly, you don't get paid a penny more for lasting a second more. So why would you want to write a longer song? If you think about my favourite U2 anthem, Where the Streets Have No Name, it takes 2 minutes and 8 seconds before you hear Bono's voice. Do you think the Gen Z millennials that you're marketing to today would wait 2 minutes, 8 seconds to hear the vocals come in? Those days are over. So that's what we covered in last year. What I want to do this year is suitably move to principle number 3, which is drawing a crowd. Winning you over the judges doesn't win you over the consumer. Getting a Grammy Award or a Brit Award does not impact sales anymore. Consumers are the new broadcasters. We talk about social influencers for 3 days at this conference. So we need to understand, how do you draw a crowd? When the room is getting increasingly crowded and it's getting harder and harder to speak at the people at the back. So what this talk is going to be about is a concept called the long tail, which is the heart of any marketing first-year economics lecture as well. How you can stack them high and sell them cheap in the head of the distribution, but have a long tail of niche items at the tail. So let's do what any economist should do, which is plot our long tail chart. In a bricks and mortar world, high street shops, you have a head of a distribution, those blockbuster titles which make up the majority of demand, and then you have a long tail of distribution, which is items at the back of the bookshop, the back of the record shop, those niche titles which make up the minority. And there's an 80-20 rule here. The top 20% of titles generate 80% of the business. That means the next 80% of titles generate only 20. If we think about what's happened to music, and it happened to music first, it's happening to all of your industries second. What we had was Walmart in 2004 offering 4,000 albums. That was it. Now we've got Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Apple all offering 80 million songs. That's how long and skinny our long tail is. If anyone's mathematically inclined, I'm going to digress for a quick half second here, which is what you can also do is a very clever trick. Plot a 45-degree line through your long tail chart and you get the line of symmetry. That is, this is a point where 80-20 adds to 100, 90-10 adds to 100. For anyone who does maths, that's quite a cool trick for working out in the company you're advising or consulting or branding with, what is a head and what is a tail. We'll park that for a second and move back into the theme of this talk. In 2008, I proved the long tail theory was wrong. And I was really proud because I got onto the cover of New Scientist magazine, making me, my far brainier big brother, proud of me at last. But what New Scientist was talking about in 2008 is how Amazon always offers more than it stocks. It stocks the head, it sources the tail through Marketplace. We're now in 2022, and boy, has that proven a winning formula. They stack them high and sell them cheap with Amazon Choice or Amazon Recommends, but Marketplace gets you down to the tail. And what did I discover in 2008? Well, there was 13 million tracks on the digital shelf. I won't name the service, iTunes. There was 30 million tracks up there, 10 million had 0 clicks. So the dormant tail was 80% of the choice that was available. And of the 3 million which had a click, the distribution was really hit heavy. And what that led people to argue is when you offer people more choice, they want more hits. Has Simon Cowell become more or less relevant as choice has expanded? He's become more relevant. That's interesting if you're in marketing. That is interesting. A few other points. The hype and hysteria around this work that I did in 2008 led to them producing an article here which is the wrong Chris Anderson. Chris Anderson, who wrote The Long Tail, is bold. That's Chris Anderson from the TED lectures. So you can see how quick the journalists were to respond to the discovery that the long tail doesn't work. The long tail is really long. For the best part, it's dormant. And where there is life, it's incredibly skinny. This theory that we thought was going to happen, the end of Blockbuster, the growth of niche demand, had gone in reverse. That was the back end of the story. Now, moving quickly on, let's take a look at the book that produced the hype around the long tail. And then this came out in 2006. Then we're going to go to this book, which came out in 1956. Note the sexy cover. Note the very unsexy cover. Note the beautiful chat-up line in a bar. This ain't going to get you a chat-up at all. But follow me. Chris Anderson wrote a blog in 2004, a book in 2006, which changed marketing and branding forever. And he said, why is the future of business selling less of more? For those who do irony, he sold shitloads of copies of a book about selling less of more. But what he says in the book is when you look at an inventory of a high street record store, and when you add more choice, people will take that choice. That's the key thesis here. If you offer more choice, people take that choice and demand goes away from the head and down towards the tail. Fine. If we go back to 1956, a Scottish statistician who ironically was an alcoholic, Robert Goodall Brown, he wrote a book which introduced us to the log normal distribution. That's going to bore you shitless, so bear with me. What he says in this gobbledygook here is, wherever you look, what you will find is a hit-heavy, skinny-tail distribution. If you're a law firm, you've got 2 or 3 clients that pay your bills, everyone else is either losing you money or a seedbed for future growth. If you're a record label, you've got 3 or 4 artists that make all the money, everyone else is a seedbed or deadwood. In any business, you have this hit-heavy, skinny-tail distribution. If you're in marketing or branding, you'll have 2 or 3 clients that pay your bills and a bunch of others that you hope are going to succeed. So we have the view that the long tail is going to get fat, and we have a view that the long tail is going to get skinny. What I want to do now is just do a very quick history revision lesson. Chris Anderson wrote this book in 2006. He introduced the concept in 2004, and back then we had a company called Walmart as our only remaining record store in America. Ditto, I guess, Woolworths or Our Price in the UK. And yes, he was correct, because these shops would offer 4,000 unique albums. Not the 80 million songs that you find on Spotify, but just 4,000 albums. Prior to Walmart, if we go back to 2000, the millennium, we had a shop called Tower Records. Now, I don't know how many people here are old enough to remember Tower Records. I would blame them for about 70% of my student debt. Their shop in Glasgow was amazing. But Tower Records did offer a lot of choice. And this is a lesson for marketing. Tower Records offered a shit ton of choice. They offered 40,000 unique albums to any customer that walked into their store. So when you walked into Tower Records, Russ Solomon, the wise old man who set this store up, 209 branches around the world, including Japan, Israel, Scotland, wherever, had this rule which he said, I'm going to offer 40,000 unique albums at any given point when a customer comes into my store. That was his magic figure. So what I wanted to do was to challenge the long tail theory by saying that was 2004, but prior to that, there was a bricks and mortar store that did offer a lot of choice. How much choice did they offer, and how well would that choice serve today? So if you follow me on what's going to happen next, we're just going to plot 2 charts from the book. One is just to repeat what happened to the long tail chart in 2004, but this is the clever bit. There's a lot of stats involved, but I'm just going to give you the headline. What I did here was I said, if Spotify, Amazon, Apple, YouTube were to stock the top 40,000 albums, like Russ Solomon did back then in 2000, how much of the demand would they serve? How much of the business they would keep? And the answer, which is really telling, is roughly speaking 90 to 95% of their business. So Spotify is stocking 80 million songs. If you only stock the top 40,000 albums, just like Russ Solomon did back in 2000, you would keep 90 to 95% of your business. That is quite an important lesson. If we think about Robin Dunbar, he did a great paper about social connections. That is, you can only really have 150 meaningful social connections. I'm wondering whether Ross Solomon had the equivalent of Dunbar's number, which is the choice that people actually want is not infinite, it's finite. And you can optimize around 40,000 albums. There might be something in that you can work with. So what I wanted to wrap up the presentation which is to ask this question here, which is, what did Ross Solomon know back then with no data science, no algorithms? What did he know that 40,000 albums would serve the vast amount of choice that we demand that Chris Anderson and all his disciples didn't know today? And if I can conclude this presentation with a quote from Barry Schwartz, I want to spend a minute on this, which is Barry Schwartz, the author of the book The Paradox of Choice. Presumably you're familiar with that. You may know the famous jam jar study, which I can explain afterwards. But he said, some choice is better than none. We're not advocating communism here. Some choice is better than none. However, it doesn't necessarily follow that more choice is better than some. And let's just wrap this presentation up with the scale of choice we're seeing today. Firstly, today, Spotify will ingest 80,000 new songs. That's more music than was released in 1989. Secondly, since I've been talking, 20 new podcast shows have gone onto Spotify, 2 every minute. Do we need 20 podcasts in 10 minutes? Thirdly, Hollywood last year created 599 original scripted dramas. That's going towards 2 a day now. When we think about the level of choice, we have to come back to this question, which is, some choice is better than none, but how much choice is too much choice? And with that, let me hand back to Mike, and happy to take questions on stage or afterwards. But thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Will. That's fantastic. Just thinking, we've had a number of things today. We have a question about long tails, because the guys at previous, I don't know if you were here for their talk, the guys at Dreams were saying that they were investing a load of stuff just in a couple of sites rather than the long tail of sites. And Sam Gaunt said that at GSK that they used to distribute their ad budget across about 50,000 sites, but they are cutting that in half from today and hope to just have a far smaller number of advertising sites. What is it about these power laws, about the 80-20 rule, that is so consistent? Because you're talking about hits. Other people have been using exactly the same sort of thing to talk about sites to advertising. As an economist, what is it about that curve that just makes sense?
I just think, well, firstly, going back to the lesson from Robert Gould around 1956, which is, that's life. It could be military equipment. There will be a log-normal, long-tail, hit-heavy distribution. So I think the statistics show wherever you look, you will find this market develop where very few players make up the vast majority of the business. Secondly, I think what you will find is portfolio theory kicking in here, which is how do you place your bets? And in the advertising world, do I place my bets on the big 3, big 4 media planners, or do I explore opportunities down in the tail? But thirdly, I think there's an important point to be made about platforms. If I look at what Amazon is doing, there's a great quote in my book from a colleague, Chris Gardner at CBRE, where he says, nobody goes into shops anymore and says, do you happen to have? Has anyone done that in the past 10 years? If there's an element of risk that shop on the high street doesn't have what you're looking for, you default to Amazon, and that's how Amazon wins. So we don't speculate when we're going in person to the high street anymore. We resort to going to the platforms. And I think the seed I want to sow for this audience is, it's a damn sight easier to make money off the long tail than it is to make money in the long tail. And I think that's what Amazon has mastered.
I think it's really interesting as well, like you say, the change in expectation over the last 10 years, and especially with programmatic advertising, which is something that lots of people will be here very interested about. The discourse that we've told ourselves is that there is tremendous value to be got from these weird little sites, and if only you can pick the winners, that's okay. Time and again, we find at Lumen and other people, it's the big sites that you imagine are probably good that are good. And in actual fact, the smart money is by doing the simple thing rather than using very, very complicated technology to find this sort of unexpected value at the end of the long tail. it means that there's a sort of higher naivete. The smartest thing is actually just to keep it simple.
Yeah, and I think we can take your observation and apply it to podcasts. I think podcasts have got an advertising problem. Firstly, podcasts are niche. Joe Rogan is a really big podcast, 15 million listeners, exclusive, but it's still a really big niche. And it's happening on demand. Now, we can talk about the value of advertising in podcasts, but if you've got England, Italy in the European Championship final and 30 million people sitting down to watch it all at the same time, that's a different value proposition. And that's where I think you do end up saying, reality check, call chow on this long tail hype and hysteria, it's go big or go home time. And I wonder whether that's going to happen in programmatic as well.
I think we are witnessing at the moment exactly what you're talking about.
Wow.
Of course, not all podcasts. There's a lot of range out there, and even at the long tail, there are some very good podcasts. I just want to put another shout out to Bubble Trouble, which is and again, it's not just me. I listen to it a lot. It comes out once a week.
Once a week
or so. But like I said, for those of you who weren't here at the start, it's where Scott Galloway gets his ideas from.
Yeah, I'm noticing correlation and causation. 2 weeks after our pod, his ideas turn up on his.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think it's quite interesting there, and it's something he rather kindly admitted in the last episode when he was talking to Richard. So thank you very much, Will. That's it. Will, are you going to be around for the rest of the day?
Absolutely. Any questions on how to make sense of this in your business, please hijack me at the back of the stage.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Okay, super. Well, thank you very much, Will.
Thank you.